Back here on the Meat Speak podcast, powered by the Certified Angus Beef brand. I am Bryan Schaff, and sitting across from me by way of Zoom is my good man, Chef. He's got a fine head of hair, and anytime we want to talk about anything barbecue-centric, he is our go-to Chef, Michael Ollier. Chef, how you doing?
Fantastic, B. Schaff. How are you?
Man, I am living the dream because, you know, it's not every day that you get to talk about subjects that are so near and dear to your heart and at the same time be able to call them work, right? So today we are going to talk about Tennessee whiskey and barbecue.
Yes.
I mean, it's like the peanut butter and jelly of my I was going to say of my childhood. It's my, you know, not quite, right? Sorry. Don't worry, Mom. You're off the hook. Of my since I was 20 years old. Jack Daniels is where we're going with this. And, you know, Chef, you are a guy who's always plugged into the barbecue world. Jack Daniels, of course, everybody knows it because it's the Tennessee spirit of Tennessee spirits. But they've got this foot in the barbecue world. And as Certified Angus Beef, whom we both are fortunate to work for, is involved in this barbecue competition that they put on. Give us a rundown of what that is. I mean, there's barbecue competitions, and then there's the Jack, right?
The Jack. It's a big deal. I mean, you have to be the elite and be lucky, too, as part of a lottery. You've got to do you've got to be the top of the game to make it to the Jack, and it's got such a tradition to it. This would have been the 31st year, I think, in its history. So a shame that it's not going to happen in 2020, but understandable. We'll look for it in 2021. But it's been something that we've been fortunate enough to be part of for the last 3, maybe 4 years, Bryan, as a brand. You know, our foot in the water. You and I have been there together. Our foot in the water a little bit to see what it's about, and then actually getting to sit at the judges' table. So that's been quite an honor for me, honestly, to have the tenure of a KCBS judge that I have, which quite honestly is, you know, maybe a dozen or so judges under my belt, and to be able to judge the Jack was quite a coup. So it's one of those seats that you just don't give up. You It's to the Masters, you don't give those up, and you've got a ticket at the seat of judging at the Jack, you hold on to it.
Well, you know, and it's funny you mentioned that because if you're in the food world, or honestly, if you're in the world period and have ever watched television of some sort, the judges' tent at the Jack. I mean, if you want to talk food, it's like you turn around and it's like, there's Mike Mills, there's Tuffy Stone, there's Amy. I mean, holy cow. But then you also look in, I remember a couple years ago, John Schneider was there, and you actually were sitting next to Kelly Pickler's husband, who is like a studio musician in Nashville.
He and I are like table buddies at table 2 now. We always hang out together.
It's amazing, and it really is. You know, the Jack is the kind of the Super Bowl of barbecue in that, you know, there are 2 automatic qualifications, correct? The winner from Memphis in May, the winner from the American Royale, and then the rest of it is you have to have won to even have a chance to get in. And you know, I mean, you look at the list of folks who've not just you know, you can easily say the folks who've won, the people who have competed at the Jack, even if they haven't won, it's a pretty impressive list, isn't it?
It sure is. And you know, it's to your point, under the judges' tent of any competition that I've been part of, it's more of a, I don't know how to put it. It's more of a who's who within the tent than ever. And so that's why it's something that we think it's kind of important to be part of, is where else can we get a concentration of the who's who in barbecue in under literally one tent? And so going to that time slot is just one of the greatest things I look forward to every year.
Yeah, it's an amazing thing, not just from the competition standpoint, but Lynchburg, Tennessee, right? It's a town of 2,000-ish people, and once a year, it's like the world converges on Lynchburg, Tennessee. And which is funny, I think folks have heard it. Lynchburg, Tennessee actually sits in the Dry County. So it's not like there's bars and Jack Daniels flowing and all these things like that. But there's such reverence that is down there. It's a very beautifully surreal scene that you get to experience late October every year. Although this year you'd mentioned it already, they have sadly suggested that, or they have gone ahead and made the call that they're not going to have it this year. It is rescheduled for October 8th to 9th in 2001. But that said, I guess flipping the page, the whole reason that we're kind of setting the scene is I got the opportunity to sit down with a gentleman named Jeff Arnett. And you may not know the name Jeff Arnett, but Jeff Arnett is the master distiller of Jack Daniels. And I know we are a meat-centric podcast, but let's be real, meat and spirits, they go hand in hand. I may allegedly have a bottle sitting within arm's length of where I'm sitting right now. They go hand in hand. If you get the chance to chat with a gentleman like Jeff Arnett, who's just the 7th master distiller in the history of Jack Daniels, which goes back to the 1700s, right? There have been, I believe you said there's been like 26-ish U.S. presidents in that time. There have only been 7 master distillers in that time. If you have a chance to pick this guy's brain, what does he do? How did he get to do what he does? And what truly makes a really good Tennessee whiskey? Man, you're going to take that, right? It's like the opportunity to sit down and, talk to Babe Ruth, in the batting cage, right? I got to talk to him in Lynchburg, Tennessee. So that's coming up here in a few minutes. We're going to probably turn over to that and have a chat with Jeff Arnett, the master distiller of Jack Daniels. And Chef, if you wouldn't mind sticking around, we're going to come back and follow up with you to talk a little bit more about barbecue and the people and that really cool tie-in that they have with Jack Daniels. So
take a listen.
Excellent. So stick around here. Coming up next, Jeff Arnett, master distiller of Jack Daniels. Okay, so we're here with Jeff Arnett on the Meat Speak podcast. Not every day that we don't talk about meat, but when you're in Lynchburg, Tennessee, when you're in Jack Daniels' house, and you get a chance to chat with just the 7th master distiller in the history of Jack Daniels, I mean,
you got to do it.
You got to do it, right?
Yeah.
So first, tell me, in our profession, meat people, certified Angus people, we work with a lot of meat science PhDs, and people say, how do you get the title to be meat scientist? And there's this long story. How do you get the title master distiller? Because that might even trump meat scientist.
I came out of college with an engineering degree, and I went to work for a food and beverage manufacturing company. I learned the sensory sciences in coffee, learning how to taste individual coffee beans and class and grade them for flavor and acidity and body, and think about further how you would blend them to make them more balanced and complete and complex as a unit than they were individually. I made juice beverages, I made salted snacks, but there was an opening here at Jack Daniels back in 2001. They were looking for a quality control manager. So that was the first role that I took here. So working as quality control at Jack, you get involved with everything that we do here. And it takes years from the time that we take water and grains and yeast. By the time that has been mellowed and matured in a barrel and is ready to be bottled and shipped all over the world, it's years as far as the duration of time. And most people only work in one part of our process, but quality allowed me to work in every spot. So it allowed me to put all the pieces of the puzzle together. I was training under the previous master distiller who'd worked for Jack Daniels for 40 years, had served as master distiller for 20 of those, and was just lucky enough to be in the right place at the right time. After 7 years as quality control manager, he passed the baton to me, so that was 11 years ago now. So the way my job is structured now, I spend 80% of my time here in Lynchburg because we make every drop of our whiskey here. I travel about 50 to 60 days a year, and in the last 11 years I've been to 41 countries. So yeah, we're sold in 170, and we're proud that every drop is made right here, an hour south of Nashville, literally a town that only has one stoplight, but is I guess probably one of the largest whiskey manufacturing operations in the country.
Can you talk about that? Jack being Jack. It's everywhere, right? Yeah. Everybody's heard of Jack Daniels. Every bit of it is here. Can you talk about, I guess, how important is it that the fact that you guys take such pride that every drop comes from here? Is that you've gotten really big, but you haven't
you haven't ever compromised where you come from.
You know, like I said, it takes years to manufacture a whiskey, and it can't be rushed. So if you want to produce, a product for the entire world in one spot, it means that you have to have some size or scale. So for us, we have 90 warehouses, for instance, and they're scattered throughout the hills of Lynchburg. Because we're making every drop here, we store every drop here, we mature it. And that is a part of us not making it in other places, is that, our water source, our grain supply, yeast tends to be regional and a product of where it grows. And we have a proprietary yeast culture. So if we move Jack Daniel's somewhere else, it would start to change just because of the natural processes that exist. But we need a 4 seasons climate for the whiskey to work its way in and out of the barrel over the course of years. So, if you change the climate, you change the location, you change your water, the product is going to change. And that's one of the things that we want to be able to promise people, is that when they pick up a bottle of Jack Daniel's, even if the bottles were produced years apart, that they're going to be the same. That you're assured that no matter where you find it on the planet, you know who made it, where it was made, and what it's going to taste like.
Yeah. Can you talk about, so you started on coffee,
Yeah.
right? Now you work for Jack Daniel's, right? Jack Daniel's is everywhere. Can you talk about, and I understand there's certain things you cannot divulge, and I understand that, but what is the magic behind Jack? What is it that has made it successful for so long that, people just keep coming back to it?
You hear that phrase, if you do garbage in, you'll get garbage out. I think with Jack Daniel's, it's a quality in, quality out scenario. It's hard to point to one thing that makes Jack Daniel's what it is, but we have a fantastic water source that flows from a limestone cave. It's cold and mineral rich and iron free. We have a great supplier base. We only buy the finest grade of each of the grains that we use: corn, malted barley, and rye. We have a proprietary yeast culture. We have mastered whiskey making over 150 years. If you go through our distillery, you'll see that things are built a certain way, and that's been years of learning, and also the passing down of understanding and the skill from one generation to the other. Of the employees at Jack Daniel's, we have 600 production employees. 400 of them are the sons and daughters of previous employees. So, we're a multi-generation. It's a passing down of skill and pride from family member to family member. But the charcoal mellowing process, we make barrels. Jack Daniel's is the only whiskey company that makes barrels as well, and barrels are all of your color and over half of your flavor. So controlling all those parts of the process, making it all in one spot, I think adds up to Jack Daniel's being a whiskey like no other.
Yeah. As you look, there's distilleries popping up everywhere. From your perspective, from a Jack perspective, do you see that? Is that competition? Is that it just draws more of a spotlight on what you guys do?
I would tell you that I think a rising tide will raise all ships, and what this boom in what they call craft distilling or small scale whiskey making has done is it's created interest in whiskey. So Jack Daniel's, I don't think has been harmed by people coming into the industry, because what they're doing is they're luring people who are maybe beer drinkers or vodka drinkers or rum drinkers into the whiskey category, because they're wanting to sample around because they're interested in what's going on there. So I think it's been good for all of us. We went from 3 distilleries in the state of Tennessee to now 40, and that happened in just about 5 or 6 short years. And I'm the vice president of the Tennessee Distillers Guild, so I'm good friends with a lot of the small distillers, and we have helped one another out of situations. We've been able to get laws that were written in the 1930s kind of corrected, so that we have we're being socially responsible but not being restricted, where we can't sell and market and manufacture our products like beer and wine do. Distilled spirits are often kind of viewed as a different category, and a lot of people will allow something for one form of beverage alcohol but not another. So we always kind of say that we want parity. We just want to be treated like everybody else. So it's been good to get to know them, and I think in general this influx of new distillers it's got people like us. We've come out with 8 new products in 8 years, and I'm not sure that we would be doing that unless there was so much interest in people wanting to try new things.
Talk about those new things. Obviously, when people think of Jack, they think of old number 7, right? Or Gentleman Jack. Yeah. But what else is out there?
Our old number 7 Tennessee Whiskey is the number 1 selling whiskey on the planet, and it's still the biggest thing in our portfolio. But surprisingly, the second largest selling thing now is honey. Flavors have become an attractive thing, because what we found is that when we first put out honey in 2011, many of the people who would come to me and say, "Hey, I drink honey, and I never was a Jack Daniel's drinker, I never was a whiskey drinker, but ever since you came out with honey, you've hooked me." So it brought new consumers to us, but also people who were loyal whiskey drinkers would tell us that there were times in life, occasions, where whiskey didn't work, and they would go to another product, like after dinner, during dessert or something. They wouldn't necessarily serve whiskey, but they'll use honey there. So then we follow that up with cinnamon or fire. Now we've come out with Tennessee apple. So we have 3 flavors that actually mix well across them. So people can take the honey and fire and put them together, and they call it a red hot honey or a bee sting. People can take the Tennessee fire, the cinnamon product with the apple, and kind of make mom's apple pie or apple turnover. So people are getting creative with the flavors. We're doing our very best to keep those a quality product. It uses our Old No. 7 Tennessee whiskey, all natural flavorings. But it has definitely created a whole new market for Jack Daniel's over just the last 5 or 6 years.
You know, what does that mean for you? I mean, you're from Tennessee, right?
Yeah.
And Tennessee is all about the Jack. And you've released all of these new variations under your watch. I guess, do you have a favorite, or is there part of you that still says, you know what, it's all about the Old No. 7?
You know, I think definitely Old No. 7 is our flagship, and it's always going to be our biggest and most important brand. I was a Tennessee Squire, so I literally was in the fan club of Jack Daniel's, and the reason I was because of the Old No. 7 Tennessee whiskey. Yeah. So it's important, but I love our single barrel. You know, I think if you're a more mature drinker, a very discerning one, and you like to sip and savor, there's things beyond Old No. 7 within our portfolio that kind of, you know, based on what you like, and if you want something approachable, we've got Gentleman Jack. If you want something big and bold, it's really interesting, we've got a single barrel. If you want the tried and true, flexible, balanced, it's Old No. 7. We got flavors, we've got barrel finishes. We're doing a lot, needless to say. But, you know, being a barrel maker and controlling more of the process than anyone else does, we feel like we've got the right to test the waters and do a lot of different things because we think we can do them well.
So with all those, you know, on a personal level, you got a favorite?
You know, when I first came here, I was a quality control manager, and I took over the single barrel processing area. So I was one of 2 people that was tasting every barrel to let it go to market. So sometimes 40 or 50 different unique individual barrels in a day. And that was a great learning experience for me. And I'm still a big fan of our single barrel whiskey. It's super high character, it's dark, it's aromatic. I just like to put it in a glass with some quality ice on it, just kind of let it dilute a little bit. And as whiskey changes in proof, as it dilutes, it actually is like peeling an onion back. You'll notice differences of character as the proof changes. So I always tell people, not only is every single barrel different, but every sip will be different. If you'll put 1 ice cube in it and just let it slowly work it down, it'll change all the way down to 40 proof, and it's bottled at 94. So you can literally almost cut it in half, but you're noticing it's like an onion peeling back its layers and showing you its nuances.
Talk about the job itself. You know, you talk about how much you get to taste. All right, every barrel, right, in quality control. I mean, it's got to be a dream job, isn't it?
It is, you know, but it goes more than just me. As I was saying, we have about 600 employees here today. 100 of them are official whiskey tasters, so they've been trained on the standards of Jack Daniel's. So I travel about 50 to 60 days a year, but tasting needs to go on every day here. Everything we're putting in barrels, everything that's coming out of barrels and being prepared for batches, they've got to be tasted. As much as technology has advanced over the years, nothing will tell you what something smells and tastes like. That you still are dependent upon human beings to do that for you. So it's important that they know the standard. So I get the credit for managing the brand, but realistically, I've got 100 people who are multi-generation whiskey makers who love the brand, who are its stewards, and they were the stewards when I got here, and they'll be the stewards when I go. So I just get credit for a lot of people's hard work and love and passion of the brand.
Is there a process for achieving? I mean, it almost sounds like it's a master sommelier of Jack Daniel's. Is there a process to get to that standard?
Now, the people who serve as official whiskey tasters here, we actually want them to be representative of the drinking public. So we have people within that group that we know are super sensitive on nose and palate. I would call them the hypersensitive people that can smell and taste everything and every nuance. And then you have people that I think are more normal, where they'll notice the big things, but they don't necessarily smell and taste every single minor difference of it. So you want your panel to kind of represent that diversity of people and what their senses are. Now, we do recognize people within the group that we know that you can just put a off note and purposely spike it into a sample. It's just a few parts per million. The people who can consistently find it and pull it out. So that is our master panel. So we use that group of people to get down to splitting hairs, if you will. When we have to make some choices on, you know, is it ready or is it not? We're not going to this broader panel. We're going to a very talented, skilled group of people who are gifted on the palate to be able to help us manage it.
How about as far as the competition here that's going on this weekend? What's your role in all this?
You know, I just helped to host this, but this is my 12th barbecue in a row as Master Distiller and helping do this, but I love the passion that comes from this group of people. They all came here to win. They're very competitive, but to watch them celebrate one another's victories the way they do, they really are happy for one another. So there's a sense of community and family among them, that they want to be the best, but they, as I was saying it last night, that, when you share joy, you double it, and when you share sorrow, you half it. And I've watched these people go through cancer together, lose loved ones, and how they rally around one another and celebrate victories together. They're just a great group of people. So we love having them come to town because it just makes our family of whiskey makers even larger when we have all the cookers in town.
Is this the busiest weekend in Lynchburg?
It's one of them for sure. If the weather cooperates, we can have as many as 25,000 people who will attend. So you'll be shoulder to shoulder through this whole park. On a rainy day like today, where people were looking at the weather and deciding to come, we might have closer to 10 or 15,000 who will come. But we have the Tennessee Squires, our fan club. They're going to come out rain or shine. So we have a massive thing set up for them, and they're lined up down the street trying to get in over there. But it gives them a chance to get to know one another. A lot of our squires in this fan club are also collectors. They love to show off the things that they found, old rare things from Jack Daniels that they have in their collections. A lot of them carry around brag books of all the things that they found. And I'm here to sign bottles for them. So that's the other thing that I do. Is a lot of people, once they have something collectible, they'll want a signature and a date on it. So I do that.
That's awesome. You ever step back and think about, I guess, the magnitude and the gravity of the job aside, but the title itself. You look at the reputation that Jack Daniels, no matter how big they've gotten, they are still that gold standard for Tennessee whiskey.
Yep.
To be one of 7 master distillers, what is that like? I guess, is that something maybe you're still processing?
It's humbling for sure. It was 3 years ago that we were celebrating our 150th anniversary, so it was a big milestone year for us. And it got me thinking about the fact that only 5 people have served since Jack Daniel to me. In this, very small wall of the old office, you have all the faces of the Master Distiller, and there's so few of them. Over that same time frame, I was looking a few years ago, thinking about, how does this compare to other offices that people would know? Since 1866, there have been 28 U.S. presidents. There have been 12 popes that have served over the Catholic Church. So I tell people, when you're the Master Distiller Jack Daniels, it's like 4 times better than being the president, and it's almost twice as good as being the pope. And that's just doing the math on it. And it has a lot of other perks that go along with it as well. But yeah, it's quite an honor, and it was humbling. From the first time they mentioned it to me that they were considering me to take my mentor's place, I was like, wow, that's going to be a game changer. You're not anonymous anymore, so I can walk around the park and most people know who I am, whether I know them or not. A lot of them, I'll see them and I'm like, I recognize you. I can't remember your name, but it's fun. We say that we make more than whiskey here. We make friends, and whether you drink or not is it's neither here nor there. But we have people who come and take the tour who don't drink a drop, but they just love the history. They're fascinated by the process, and that's a big part of who we are at Jack Daniels. It's the pride, it's the heritage, the history of the brand. So you're drinking more than just the liquid. You're drinking the story, and it's making a statement about you when you drink it.
One last question. We've got to have one meat-centric question among this. Jeff Arnett, Master Distiller of Jack Daniels. We'll say, speaking on behalf of Jeff Arnett, not necessarily taking a position on Jack Daniels. Yeah. What's the official beef cut of Jeff Arnett's grill?
I'm typically, when I was a kid, my only restaurant experience was in a place that was called the Ribeye Barn. So I love ribeye steaks. They grill well, the marbling of fat through it. They don't dry out very easily. So I'll usually cook one that's sort of just on the approaching side of medium, warm pink center, still nice and juicy. So I like a thick cut ribeye if I'm going to choose a steak for myself. But we tell people that we use corn, malted barley, and rye. We take all the starches and sugars out of that when we make distiller's beer, and that's what we distill into whiskey. But that leftover grain, if you're not a distillery employee, if you don't work at the distillery, most people here raise cattle, and they do it off of the stillage or the byproduct of the distillery because it's got all the carbohydrates out of it. It's just protein with a little bit of fat and fiber. So if you feed stillage to these beef cattle that people are taking in and beefing up and getting ready to sell, you can put 2 to 3 pounds of lean weight on a cow a day feeding the stuff. So we tell people some of the best beef on the planet comes from Lynchburg because we marinate it from the inside out.
Well said. Well, Jeff Arnett, Master Distiller Jack Daniels, Thank you so much for taking time.
Thank you. I've enjoyed it.
And back here on the Meat Speak podcast. That was no joke. One of my most, honestly, I had the opportunity to talk to Jeff Arnett, and as soon as I did, the first thought in my head was, okay, now how do we make this about meat so we can actually put it in the podcast, right? But if you go to Lynchburg, Tennessee, if you go down to the Jack, which is always in mid to late fall, right? Mid to late October, really, if you want to get specific, there's no shortage of meat. It's the World BBQ Championships. And, Chef, you are a KCBS judge. Judging the Jack is one thing, but you go down, the competition is on Saturday. On Friday night, there's quite the to-do up on Barbecue Hill, which sort of overlooks the holler above the distillery itself. Man, I mean, is that one of the highlights of your calendar year?
It sure is. Every year you look forward to it, that Friday night gathering, because it's kind of an intimate group. You're only invited to the Hill if you are either competing in the Jack, or you're a judge in the Jack, or it's a VIP only. And so it's been something we've been fortunate enough to have some fun actually grilling up there. So been up there with Big Jim Stansel, our buddy with bare knuckles.
The tallest man in barbecue.
The tallest man in barbecue. And he looks down on you, but not in that way, right? And of course, Barbecue Ninja was there last year. So we pulled out all the stops, and we had some big tomahawk steaks. And this isn't their dinner per se. It's just because, right? It's just for fun, right? It's because there's a grill, and we should be putting meat on it when people gather. That's the reason. And so that's always a fun thing. Always looking forward to thinking about what Big Jim and I are going to put on that grill actually each year. So this would be the time where we'd probably be talking about it. So we'll think about what we're going to do for 2021. But to your point, and Jeff is just fantastic. He hosts that event really on the Hill, and it's always a pleasure to hear him speak and command the crowd.
Yeah, it's an incredible event. Of course, our buddy, who we knew before we realized he was even at the Jack, Chip Chapman, the weatherman from Chattanooga, Tennessee. The man can operate a grill himself, but he's been the MC of the Jack. This was going to be year 30, correct? Chip is the reason that I have a seat at the judges table. So it's thanks to old Chip Chapman that I have a seat there, and I appreciate his orange jacket every year. Give us an idea of what it actually is like being the judge, because it's not just, oh, I ate this, I like the way that it tasted, it gets high marks. It's a little more intense than that, right?
Yeah, it is a different level of barbecue. Meaning it's, when you look at the presentation score and what happens the first phase is the table captain opens the box and gives everyone, all the 6 judges at that particular table, an opportunity to mark the first score, which is judging for appearance. And it is rare that you see something that's not a full 9, and that would be the highest mark. And so you kind of feel bad when you give the 8. It is that level of barbecue that these are 8s and 9s across the board, generally speaking. So it's pretty rare that you see something that's not. Typically, it's kind of an international team. You're like, oh, that must be an international team, because you could just tell that something was different, not on the appearance, but on the taste side. And then it just culminates. It gets better and better. And I don't know what else I can add to it. It's just that it's a high level of barbecue. It is unlike, I will say, it's unlike chicken that you would taste normally. It's unlike pork that you would taste normally. And for us, brisket, it's unlike what you would experience when you go to the barbecue joint.
Yeah. Although I will say, and I know that I have mentioned this on the podcast in the past, our mutual pal, Chris Lilly, right? He's often competing at the Jack. And I've kind of learned, brisket usually goes to the judges about 4:00 in the afternoon. And once they go, there are a lot of the Chris Lilly rejects that didn't make, the delivery to the barbecue tent for judging. And so I just sort of position myself and get ready to swoop as soon as those come out of the pits. And it's some of the best eats I'll have all year long.
Smart man. Smart man. The point is that the percentage that actually ends up in the box is such a fraction of what they cook, because they absolutely want them. You have one opportunity. It's one bite. It is truly one bite to make that impression. I usually on the rib, I'll take a bite on the other side also. I want the benefit of the doubt. I want to have the full experience on it. So two is the max. You're not going back for much more. You just can't handle it. Think about it. You've got 6 chicken to eat each time. You've got 6 pork ribs. You got 6 pork. You've got 6 brisket. There's an other category and a dessert typically. So you're looking at, what is that, 50 some bites? You're not taking down each of those chicken thighs. You can't do it and shouldn't do it.
That becomes a competition in itself if you think about it. You know, last question before we put a wrap on here. I think it's only right. One of the questions that, of course, I posed to Jeff Arnett was meat-centric. Like, what is the official beef cut of Jeff Arnett? I'm going to pose it to you. I'm going to turn this around. And one thing, although, you know, the county where Jack Daniel's in Lynchburg, Tennessee is dry, judges always get sent home with a little something for when they get back home. So you have procured a couple bottles of Jack over the years in addition to your own personal shopping. How do you take your spirits? Are you a guy who mixes it? Or are you a neat guy? Are you on the rocks? How do you like your Jack?
Generally, I'm an on the rocks guy. And after going to the Jack, and I really got into the Jack and Ginger. So it's maybe a seasonal way to drink it, right? So Jack and Ginger, part of the year, neat sometimes, and then on the rocks when I want it to be chilled.
Well said. Well said. You know, one of my favorite things, and unfortunately it's been a few years since we got to hang, our buddy Gary Brown, the former Green Bay Packers offensive lineman turned, you know, meat connoisseur. He turned me on to the Gentleman Jack a couple of years ago, and that's a different, I mean, it's so smooth. It's like you're riding on a sled in the middle of winter time. It's delightful. So, that's Chef Michael Ollier of the Certified Angus Beef brand. Not just the chef, but a guy who knows a whole lot more barbecue than the average Joe. Sir, thank you for taking time to join us here on the Meat Speak podcast, powered by the Certified Angus Beef brand. If this is your first time tuning in, know that you can find us across all of your major podcasting platforms, Google Play, Apple, Spotify, or by visiting certifiedangusbeef.com/podcast, or honestly, follow me on the Facebook or the Instagram. So until next time, thanks for joining us, and we'll catch y'all later.